Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into some of the biggest myths about the American Revolution and setting the record straight. Because, let's face it, sometimes history is more complicated than the stories we tell. From the signing of the Declaration of Independence to the Boston Tea Party, we tend to simplify these events, turning them into almost legendary tales. But when we dig a little deeper, we often find that the reality is far more nuanced, and dare I say, even more interesting. So, buckle up as we separate fact from fiction and take a closer look at the American Revolution, a period that continues to shape the world we live in today. Get ready to have some of your assumptions challenged. The American Revolution is often painted as this epic fight for democracy, a triumph of the common man against tyranny. And while the ideals of freedom and self-determination were definitely a driving force, the reality is a bit more complicated. See, the founding fathers, those dudes in powdered wigs we always hear about, weren't exactly rushing to give everyone the right to vote. In fact, the newly formed United States was pretty far from a true democracy. We're talking limited suffrage, meaning only white men who owned property could vote. That excluded a whole lot of people: women, enslaved Africans, indigenous communities, and even white men without land. So while the revolution was a huge deal in terms of breaking away from British rule and establishing a new nation, it wasn't a complete victory for democratic ideals. That fight, as we know, would continue for generations to come. The revolution was really about independence, about the colonies taking control of their own destiny. And while the desire for greater freedom and representation was definitely there, it's important to remember that the definition of freedom was pretty different back then. It's a good reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's full of contradictions and complexities, which honestly is what makes it so fascinating to study. The Boston Tea Party. The ultimate act of colonial defiance, right? Dumping all that tea into Boston Harbor, sticking it to the man? And while it was definitely a bold move, it wasn't just about high taxes on tea. Sure, no one likes a tax hike, but this went beyond just a few extra pennies on their Earl Grey. This was about a much bigger principle: no taxation without representation. The colonists were furious that they were being taxed by the British Parliament without having any say in the matter. They didn't have any elected representatives in Parliament, so they felt like their voices weren't being heard. It was like being forced to pay for a party you weren't invited to. The Boston Tea Party was a way for the colonists to send a very clear message: we're not going to stand for this. It was a symbolic act of rebellion against what they saw as unfair and unjust taxation. And you know what? It worked. The British government was not happy about their tea getting tossed into the harbor, and their response only further fueled the flames of revolution. So, the next time you see a picture of that fateful night in Boston Harbor, remember, it wasn't just about the tea. It was about standing up for what you believe in, even if it means sacrificing a good cuppa. Picture this. July 4th, 1776. The Founding Fathers, gathered in that sweltering Philadelphia hall, quill pens scratching furiously as they sign their names to the Declaration of Independence. A dramatic scene, right? Except, it didn't quite happen that way. While the 4th of July is the date we celebrate as Independence Day, the signing of the Declaration was a bit more drawn out. It wasn't a one-day affair, but a process that unfolded over several weeks. The Continental Congress actually voted to declare independence on July 2nd, 1776. Think of it as a birthday, where the actual birth happens a couple of days before the big party. The official signing of the Declaration, with John Hancock's legendary signature, didn't happen until August 2nd. So the whole image of everyone gathered around signing on the 4th of July? A bit of a historical embellishment. But hey, that doesn't make the Declaration any less important. It was a bold statement declaring the colonies' right to govern themselves and break free from British rule. It was a turning point in history, setting in motion the birth of a new nation. So, while we might celebrate Independence Day on July 4th, it's important to remember that the fight for independence was a process, a journey, not a single event. And that journey is reflected in the way the Declaration itself came to be. We often talk about the American Revolution as if the entire colonial population was united against British rule. But the truth is, it was a lot more divided than that. In fact, a significant portion of the population remained loyal to the crown. These colonists, known as Loyalists or Tories, had their reasons for supporting British rule. Some had strong economic ties to Britain, while others genuinely believed that staying part of the empire was in the colony's best interest. Imagine the pressure and the difficult choices these colonists faced. Families were divided, friendships were tested, and communities were torn apart by the conflict. It was a time of intense political and social upheaval. The Loyalists often faced harsh treatment from their patriot neighbors. They were accused of treason, ostracized from their communities, and some even had their property confiscated. It's a reminder that revolutions, while often necessary, can be messy and painful affairs. After the war, many Loyalists chose to leave the newly formed United States, seeking refuge in Canada or returning to Britain. Their stories are an important reminder that history is rarely a simple story of good versus evil, but rather a complex tapestry of competing perspectives and motivations. The signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783 is often seen as the grand finale of the American Revolution. And while it officially ended the war between Great Britain and the newly independent United States, it wasn't exactly a clean break. Think of it like a messy breakup. Sure, you've signed the papers, but there are still loose ends to tie up, lingering resentments, and maybe even a few shouting matches. The Treaty of Paris established the boundaries of the new nation, recognized American independence, and even granted fishing rights to American ships off the coast of Canada. But it didn't magically erase all the tension and conflict. For starters, the treaty didn't address the situation of the Loyalists who had remained faithful to Britain. Many faced ongoing persecution and discrimination, even after the war officially ended. And then there were the Native American tribes who had allied themselves with the British during the war. The treaty largely ignored their territorial claims, setting the stage for future conflicts and displacement. So, while the Treaty of Paris marked a significant turning point, it didn't signal a complete end to the fighting or the challenges that lay ahead for the fledgling nation. The American Revolution might have been officially over, but the struggle to define the nation's identity and secure its future was far from finished. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more historical debunkings. See you next time. We've just scratched the surface of the American Revolution. There's so much more to explore, so many fascinating stories and figures to uncover. Remember, history isn't